So I'm Jessi James. I'm a marine education specialist here at the NEC. So very excited to have you guys on live with us today. I'm here to talk about some reptiles. So specifically turtles. We're going to talk about the differences between sea turtles, land turtles, a little bit about their anatomy, and then maybe, if he's very good, we'll have a special guest come on in a little bit to definitely show some differences between land turtles and sea turtles that we have. So today I have some artifacts that are lined up on the table, and we're kind of just going to go through and discuss them. And then per usual, like how live works, y'all are welcome to ask questions. I'm here to hopefully answer them. And we'll get started with these artifacts. So a lot of these things that we have here at the NEC, they are real. We do not go out into the wild and hurt turtles to get these artifacts, of course. They're either donated to us or we find them naturally, and then we obtain the correct permits in order to keep them for educational purposes. So we're not out to hunt turtles or anything like that, because that's not good. But we have these artifacts in order to show our K-12 programs and the public, in order to get them more involved with marine education, and so that way they can learn from these artifacts. So even though they are real and they're dead, they're repurposed, that way we can reuse them for education. So let's start with some skulls. So this guy right here, this is our big loggerhead sea turtle skull. So turtles, like we said, are reptiles. Reptiles are cold-blooded. They typically, they don't produce milk, they lay eggs. So they're not mammals. They are in the class of reptiles, but my favorite thing to talk about with reptiles is how small their brains are compared to mammals. So we're looking at this big loggerhead sea turtle skull. I can tell it's a loggerhead sea turtle because of the size, so it's got a big old head, so it's a loggerhead sea turtle. But the brain would normally sit right back in here, in this little tiny hole in the back. And that for sure tells us, of course, that as a reptile, they do have small brains, compared to mammals, which have obviously much larger brains. So, now, a little bit smaller than the loggerhead sea turtle, we have a green sea turtle skull. Again, I can tell by the size and the shape. So in comparison, it is much smaller than the loggerhead sea turtle. The loggerhead sea turtle is actually the second smallest sea turtle species, the largest being the leatherback. We do have the leatherback in the Gulf of Mexico, but we don't really see them much in Mississippi. They either tend to go towards Texas or Florida. But we do see the green sea turtle. We do see the hawksbill sea turtle. We do also have these in the Gulf of Mexico. Again, much smaller than the green sea turtle, the loggerhead sea turtle. But I can tell most definitely that this is a hawksbill because of its beak. So it has this very sharp overhang on its beak, almost like a bird or a hawk. So that's why it's called the hawksbill sea turtle. And we actually have a little bit of a segue. We have a hawksbill sea turtle shell. So, a little bit of a misnomer about turtles. We often get asked, can turtles come out of their shell? They can't. So they're fused inside of their shell by their spine. So all sea turtles have a spine on the inside of their shell, along with their ribs, so they cannot fully come out of their shell. And again, that's one of the biggest questions we get asked about turtles. That applies to all turtles: land, terrapin, tortoises, sea turtles. All fused in that shell. If that shell gets damaged in any way, that does hurt the turtle, because it's all compact. So, show you again on a larger shell. This way you can definitely see its spine, you can definitely see its ribs. So turtles are most definitely vertebrates. So vertebrates have a vertebra and a vertebral column, so that way it provides structure just like we have vertebrae in our spine. And turtles are born with their shells, so once they come out of the egg, they are ready to go, shell fully formed, ready to move on. So like I said, with sea turtles, same thing with land turtles, still fused inside their shell. So this is from a land or a terrestrial turtle of some sort. I actually am not 100% sure on the species, but I know it's not a sea turtle. Their shell is shaped a little bit different. This one is kind of more rounded, and it's also a little more dome shaped. But again, it does have a vertebral column on the inside.
So I have a quick question.
Sure.
Can you tell us the difference between turtles, terrapins, and tortoises?
Yes. So actually, tortoises, terrestrial turtles, sea turtles, and terrapins, did I say terrapins? Yeah. All of those are actually under the larger order of turtles. So they're all testudines. I actually just learned that the other day. See, you can be a biologist and still learn new things every day. They are eventually broken down further in classification, but they are all turtles. So sea turtles obviously live in our oceans. They have longer limbs, so for swimming, they have more like paddle-like appendages. Land turtles would be like your red-eared sliders, the ones you're seeing crawling around in your backyard, your box turtles. The easiest way to tell those apart are they have claws on the end of their feet. So they have webbed appendages with claws. Tortoises are also terrestrial, but they have almost like stumpy elephant feet. They don't have claws, but they have little nails. And then terrapins, which are also turtles, are freshwater dwelling turtles or estuarine. So sometimes they're in that saltwater mix in our bayous and streams, especially here on the Gulf Coast.
Okay.
So, but we mostly see, of course, sea turtles out in the Gulf of Mexico. We're seeing those terrestrial turtles in our backyard, like the box turtles. We have terrapins here. I don't really see them as often. And then tortoises, we do have tortoises here, of course, too, so we have to go for tortoises, the most prominent one. And they're highly, highly endangered, like most other turtle species, so.
And so obviously, all reptiles need water. Mm-hmm. So how do sea turtles get water? And they're always in the sea, but it's not drinking water.
So that's a good question. So turtles actually have a gland that kind of sits behind their eyes. So it would be right in here somewhere. And it's called a salt gland. So they actually take in water from the ocean, and then the salt is secreted through that salt gland. So it almost looks like they're crying, but they're not. They're just excreting salt, just like we sweat to excrete our salt. And then they can get a very small amount of their fresh water through the food that they're eating. So sea turtles especially love things like jellyfish. They'll also eat vegetation, so things like seagrass, kelp, depending on where they are. And they might get a little bit of water content out of that, but it's mostly coming through, filtering it through that salt gland. So that's also kind of a good segue too. So that's what sea turtles eat. But very similarly, our terrestrial species are eating, grasses. We feed our turtles here at the NEC all sorts of vegetables. They're also, they're omnivores, so they will eat things like bugs. They will actually eat small mammals, fruits, berries, nuts, anything they can find in order to fill themselves. But somewhat similar that the sea turtles are eating vegetation and meat on occasion.
Then there was one, I saw that an alligator snapping turtle uses its tongue. What's up with that?
Okay, so the alligator snapping turtle, if you've ever seen one, they look like angry dinosaurs, but they are pretty special. So they typically live in ponds, or we do, occasionally find them in our bayous. But they have a special hunting mechanism with their tongue. So their tongue, almost like an anglerfish, has like a little frilly piece to it, and when they're looking for food, when they're hunting, they'll open up their mouth and kind of wiggle their tongue around like a lure, where it looks like a worm or an insect, and a fish will come by and think it's very interesting and then go to grab it, and then all the snapping turtle has to do is shut its mouth and it's caught its prey. So it's a pretty cool hunting technique.
Yeah. And then another question I saw online a lot was, are turtles deaf? A lot of people think they're deaf because you don't see any ears, so they're like, well, they must not be able to hear. Is that true?
That is actually not true. So humans have external ears, so your pinna, in order to kind of filter sound closer to your inner ears, that way we can hear. That's how we process our hearing. Turtles have an internal ear structure, so they have a tympanic membrane, which is also kind of set behind the eyes in this general region. And that absorbs vibration in order for them to hear. If you're tromping through the woods and you're making quite a bit of noise, you'll probably see a turtle go scooting by. They're pretty sensitive to sound. I know the turtles that we have here for educational purposes are pretty sensitive to sound. I like to talk to them. I feel like they can understand me when I come in and I'm chopping up food for them. But they can definitely hear. And they're definitely sensitive to vibration and those sorts of things. Sea turtles in particular, we know that sound moves faster through the water. So they can, if I had to guess, they're probably more sensitive to sound than our terrestrial species.
All right, we have our first question from Chris. He wants to know, do we have soft-shelled turtles here?
I believe we do. I'm pretty sure we do. I'm not 100% sure on that, but we can check and we will let you know. But those are really cool. So what he's talking about are, I believe they're either a freshwater species or they're also an estuarine species, but they look almost like regular turtles, but instead of that hard keratin-like shell that normal turtles have, these guys have a leathery back and they're flat. So they're pretty cool. I'm pretty sure we have them, but we'll double check on that.
So that seems like that would be an evolutionary disadvantage to have a soft shell. Do you think that affects them? Are their survival abilities?
Once again, I'm not 100% sure. I'm not the turtle expert, but we can check that for sure.
We'll put up some turtle facts in the comments.
We will. Honestly, I think that shell might have lots of positives to it. They could potentially find better hiding spots that way. They could easily fit better underneath things or down into the sediment if they're living in rivers and things like that. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. It probably has lots of evolutionary positives or trade-offs as opposed to having a big, hard keratin-made shell.
So we have another question. This is from someone we know.
Oh, okay.
Our turtle hero, Megan, is asking, what should we do if we see a turtle in the road?
Excellent question, Megan. So, of course, you don't want to put yourself in harm's way. So make sure the scene is safe first before you go rescuing a turtle. But you always want to move a turtle, of course, safely and in the direction that's going. So turtles are territorial, so they tend to stick to an area that they're used to. And they have a pretty good sense of location. They have a good sense of where they're going. So if they're headed one way across the road, make sure you don't pick it up and cross it the other way. Make sure you try to get it to where it was heading. But like I said, make sure you're safe about it. Don't try to jump out in traffic. If it's unsafe for you to move a turtle, don't move it. But if you can safely move it, just move it to the other side. You're going to want to pick it up on either side of its shell. So the top of the shell is called the carapace. So you're going to pick it up by its shell, gently walk it to the other side, and then set it down on the road. Or not the road, the other side of the road.
Jessi.
Or the field, or wherever you are.
And use hand sanitizer, right?
Yes, and you're definitely going to want to wash your hands afterward. Especially touching anything that's outside or any kind of wildlife and things like that, just because
They crawl through some gross things.
They crawl through the mud, all sorts of stuff. You don't also know if they're sick and things like that, so make sure you wash your hands. If you ever come across a turtle that's been hit by a car or that is injured in any way, the best thing you could do is probably call your local wildlife rescue center.
And now with sea turtles, there's very specific rules on that too, right?
Yes, so many terrestrial turtles are protected, or tortoises. So like I said, the gopher tortoise is highly prevalent down here on the Gulf Coast. Those are highly, highly protected. If you come across a sea turtle, you're going to want to call the proper authorities for that. So all sea turtles are heavily, heavily protected for multiple reasons. So turtles have a really slow growth rate. So there's not really a whole lot of them, and we want to make sure that they're protected. So if you come across a sea turtle, that seems in danger or sick, or just not in the right place, you're going to want to call the proper authorities for that.
And even a dead sea turtle, right?
Yes, so even dead sea turtles. So you definitely want to report those as well.
Yeah.
Somebody's making a bunch of noise over here.
Yes.
So another thing you can't really tell about turtles just by looking at them from first glance is if they're male or female, right?
Yes. So that's another big question we get is how to tell the difference between male and female turtles. So the easiest way that you can tell is that I wouldn't suggest flipping a sea turtle over, but for the sake of an example, if you look at the underside of a turtle, so the top is called the carapace, the bottom is called the plastron. So if you look at the plastron and it's concave, so it's got a little bit of a dip in it, it's going to be a male turtle. So if it's got a concave, if it's flat, it's going to be a female. So that has to do with mating, so that way essentially the male can fit on top of the female shell. The other way you can tell is its tail. So males typically have a longer tail, females have shorter ones. However, that's kind of a hard way to tell because they have to be sexually mature for that to be shown. Turtles can take anywhere from 7 to 25 years to become sexually mature. Like I said, they're very slow growers. So sometimes it's hard to tell by its tail or its plastron. The third way you can check is looking at the location of its cloaca. So the cloaca is the multi-purpose hole underneath its tail that's used for different things. But depending on the location of that, you can also tell if it's a male or female. But again, that has to do with sexual maturity. So it's a little bit hard to tell until the turtle's older, but you can also run some blood tests to check for hormones and things like that to tell. That's mostly more for scientific reasons. So.
And we have a resident turtle that we are not really sure what its deal is, right?
Right. So here at the MEC, we do have 2 resident turtles that we use for educational purposes. So they were, I don't want to say given, they're kind of on loan right now from a rehab lady that we work with closely. So she runs a wildlife rehabilitation center. And both of these guys were hit by cars, unfortunately. And then they were rehabbed, nursed back to health, and then she wanted to make sure that they get, all the enrichment and the care that they need. So they live here full time, and we take care of them full time, so that way we can use them in our educational programs. So I do have one of our turtles with us, so I will grab him really quick. Oh, sorry, buddy.
That's who was making all that noise.
Yes, so he was making lots of noise. He's very active. So this is Turtellini. This is one of our resident turtles that we use for educational purposes. And like Tavia was just saying, we're pretty sure he's a boy, but we're not 100% sure. Just because it's a little bit harder to tell. So since he was hit by a car, he's got his back legs tucked in right now. They do work. He just kind of rests them a lot more than other turtles I think would. So right now they're tucked in and his tail is tucked in. He doesn't like us to touch it, which I totally understand. So it's been a little bit harder to figure out his sex, if he's a boy or a girl.
And that's another thing that's different with land turtles and sea turtles, right? Is that land turtles can tuck in, sea turtles
can't? Exactly. So land turtles, terrestrial turtles, can fully tuck in their limbs. So he is ready to go. He wants to walk around. But he's got his back legs tucked in right now. Sea turtles, like our model we have right now, cannot fully tuck in. So they can kind of push them under their shell a little bit, but they can't fully pull in their appendages. And just like I said earlier, Turtellini is fused to his shell by a spine, so he can't fully come out of his shell either.
Very cool.
Oh, buddy.
What does he like to eat?
So we feed our turtles here a mixture of vegetables. Very occasionally they get some fruit as a treat. And then we feed them either crickets or mealworms as a protein. A majority of this food is vegetation, so we feed him things like squash and zucchini, and romaine lettuce. Anything that's really green and leafy has a lot of rich nutrients in it that he likes. And this guy definitely loves to eat. He's very funny to watch.
I have a pretty great photo of Turtellini with some dried raspberry on top of his head. Maybe I'll share that in the comments too.
Yeah, he's a chunky one for sure. He likes to eat.
He's a little pig.
Yes.
No, he's a turtle.
A turtle.
A turtle.
Turtle.
So.
All right. Well, I know you've got a lot to do today, so we'll let you go, but we appreciate you coming out and doing a live video with us, teaching everybody.
For sure. And if anyone has any other questions, of course, leave them in the comments. We will try our best to answer them. We'll definitely get back to you on that, the soft shell turtle question. And until then, we'll catch you next time.
Thank you. Thanks, Jessi.